Welcome to Vincendo Gaming. I'm Vince, and today we are talking about The Legend of Zelda. It has been a while since I last talked about The Legend of Zelda, but these videos are always the most fun for me. So today we are talking about the future of the series, and you probably hear me say that, and you're thinking like, oh my gosh, another guy is just going to sit here and talk about how we need a new art style, we need to go to a not Hyrule setting. Okay, actually, no. I am probably like the one person on the internet that actually wants another sequel to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I think, contrary to popular online opinion, that's what I want. And I can already tell this is going to be a long video. So I want to start by just saying the reason I'm making this video right now is because I do think there's probably going to be a Nintendo Direct in February. I'm not here to talk about whether that's likely, why that's going to happen or not happen, and why they're going to show any games. All I know is, there's probably going to be something here in February, and I think there's a chance there could be a Zelda reveal for the new game, and so I want to make sure this video is out there before that happens. It's Zelda's 40th anniversary this year. Right now, I think the common prediction is that there's going to be an Ocarina of Time remake, and actually, I think that is a valid prediction. I think that's probably what's going to happen. But I think any good anniversary is going to celebrate the past, but also, show us what's coming in the future, kind of our progression. So I think an Ocarina of Time remake is the perfect celebration of the past, but I think showing us at least some sort of teaser, ideally a trailer, but probably just a quick tease of the new mainline game, I think is actually pretty likely to happen. Maybe not in February, but I think at some point in this year. And so a lot of people immediately say, well, Tears of the Kingdom just came out. Surely we're not going to get this game for a couple of years. And maybe that's a little bit true, but I mean, really, Tears of the Kingdom came out in 2023. It has been said in interviews that there was a huge amount of time towards the end of its development cycle where they just polished the game. So it was mostly done, and then they just spent what was it, like a whole year where they were just polishing these mechanics. And I am in software development now. I'm not in game development. I am in a different sort of software development, and I'm not a coder, so I don't know anything about programming, but I know about software cycles, development cycles, releasing new products, releasing updates to existing products. And I will say I work in QA, which is the people that test a product. And if your game is 90% done, it is very functional. Most of your developers are not going to be working on that product. They're going to move on to the next product, where the testers are going to primarily take the main force on development. So I think it's possible that development for the new game could have started early 2023, maybe even into 2022. So, that's all of 2023, all of 2024, all of 2025. That's 3 years that they could have potentially been working on this new game. And I think that's plenty of time if you're thinking even the long development cycle for the Zelda games has been, 5 or 6 years? I mean, that is plenty of time to get a functioning sort of idea for the game, enough to give us a tease. And so as I start thinking about what a potential new game could be, I'm really excited to think about those things. And the common consensus I see online is people saying, well, I want a reset. I really need them to get out of this version of Hyrule. We've been here for too long. I need a new setting. I need a new art style. I want a big reset, similar to how Wind Waker was a reset from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and then Twilight Princess was a huge reset from Wind Waker. So a lot of people are kind of craving that right now. That's the popular opinion, but I can't say I agree with that at all. I really do not want that to happen. And so I think we need to be careful as YouTubers, and I hardly consider myself a YouTuber, but we all just need to be careful on what we say we want. Maybe some people really do want that big reset, but I think when you look at the criticisms that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom had, none of those criticisms demand a complete reset of the series, or a reset of the art style or any of that. None of the criticisms demand that. I think there is a very real way that we have a sequel to these two games that fixes those criticisms. I wrote a list of those criticisms. So this is a moment where I'm going to be looking at my script down here, but I just want to read out these criticisms that I feel like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom had and explain why that doesn't necessarily require them to completely reset this series. So you can let me know in the comments if I miss any criticisms that were talked about. I didn't look to any list. I probably should have looked at an article or something, but this is what I just had from my memory. So number one, combat was thin, right? You had like a few different weapon types, and all of those weapon types have like a 3, maybe 4 hit combo. So combat feels the same in every instance pretty much, unless you decide to, do bomb flowers or do some of the Zonai stuff. That did make it interesting. But as far as the clear cut just sword fighting, like honestly, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess did combat way better than what Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom did. But do we need to completely reset to fix that? No, we don't. We just need to have better combat abilities, like give Link the ability to do a side roll like he can do in Wind Waker, Twilight Princess. Give him the ability to jump over an enemy and smack them on the head, whatever that was called from Twilight Princess. Like, you can add new weapon types. You can do a lot of things in this format or in this kind of like gaming engine that we already have, the framework, so to speak. You can still enhance combat while staying in this framework. So number 2, weapon progression. This is another thing. We wanted it to be super open, and so weapons can break. You can get a high-level weapon from the beginning of the game. You might get a little stick at the end of the game, and either way, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. We don't need a reset to do this. You just need to give us a way to enhance our weapons. Tears of the Kingdom kind of did something similar to that, and actually, I do like what they were able to do, but you can definitely take it further, giving me the ability to upgrade a weapon over a period of time rather than having my weapons break. Number 3, more linear moments of plot progression. Yes, we can have moments. They already kind of tried to do it in Echoes of Wisdom. Instead of having the full game be one completely open experience, you can have segments of game that have open periods. So in Echoes of Wisdom, you start the game and you have the option to go through like 3 little voids, right? And you can pick which of the 3 and experience that segment of gameplay in an open way. But then there's a linear progression of the plot that opens you up into the next open segment of gameplay. So yes, you can very easily do this while staying in the same framework. Number 4, we have linear temples and dungeons. That was a big ask, and it was almost fake promised to us in Tears of the Kingdom's promotion. They kind of like made it look like we had new temples, but honestly, they were actually worse than Breath of the Wild's temples. I don't think that's a hot take. But yeah, they already do this in some of the shrines in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. There are shrines where you can't have access to any of your items, where you can't climb walls, where you can't just do whatever you want. They limit and restrict you. Hey, if you can do it in a shrine, then you can make a sort of linear temple dungeon experience like what we saw in Ocarina of Time. You can do that in this framework. You've proven it. You just have to actually do it. The next one is number 5, underwater exploration. Again, we can keep the same framework and add underwater exploration. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that. Yeah, it might be a little overwhelming when you have like a big ocean, but you can still lock the edge of the map and just give us like an actual Lake Hylia, for example, where maybe Zora's Domain is actually underwater. You can still kind of do that and just give us a way to actually swim. I remember liking the way Twilight Princess gave you the ability to swim with a tunic. That would be great to have in the next game. What is this? Number 6, I think. A new and refreshing setting. This is a common one. This is one that people talk about a lot, and I still don't think it's a necessity. I think you can stay in this Hyrule and make it different enough that the setting feels different without actually being a different setting. Tears of the Kingdom, honestly, for me, did that at like a 5 out of 10. Like, I don't think Tears of the Kingdom's reuse of Hyrule was terrible. I really don't, because I found myself going to places that I was extremely familiar with because I played 450 hours of Breath of the Wild. I still came into Tears of the Kingdom, and every time I went to a setting that I was familiar with, it felt new because I got to see how they changed it from what I remembered. But even though I enjoyed Tears of the Kingdom and still played another 400 hours of Tears of the Kingdom along with the 450 of Breath of the Wild, they need to do more than what they did in Tears of the Kingdom. So, for example, like we need a bustling castle, we need new villages, we need a very distinct difference, maybe a parallel world. What they did with the depths in Tears of the Kingdom, I will say, was not good enough. If we had that, but with different biomes, like 6 or 7 different biomes, that was like a true parallel to the main level, like the main tier, then that would have been great. But the fact that the depths are all like the same atmosphere, that's kind of what kills the depths. So if you had some other parallel world that was, you could keep Hyrule as we know it, maybe just develop the cities a little more, but then have another parallel world that is fresh to us, I think that's a good solution to keep us in this framework, but also give us a new setting. Okay, next bullet point. Link needs to be voice acted. That, yeah, they can do that. There's no reason why they can't do that while staying in this framework. And I agree, we need that change, very much so. It is so awkward when he's just silent while everyone else is talking. Especially in Tears of the Kingdom, when you know exactly that Princess Zelda is not Princess Zelda and you can't say anything about it, or Link plays no part in explaining that. Huge, huge awkward moment in the game that needs to be fixed by just having Link be voiced, and maybe the movie will kind of soften the blow with that, because clearly he's going to have to talk in the movie. Last 2 bullet points here. So second to last one, Zelda as an additional playable character. Okay, I think, for me at least, this was a criticism of Tears of the Kingdom, that Link had his own story battling Ganondorf in the current time. Zelda had her story battling Ganondorf in the past. I wanted to be able to play both of those stories. I did not want to just be stuck with Link or just be stuck with Zelda. So personally, I grew up on like Sonic Adventure. That was one of my childhood games where you play 6 different characters and you play their part in one big story. I'm not saying that the next Zelda game has to be that, but I will say that RPGs very commonly have a party system where you get to choose from 5 or 6 different party members that you cycle between. The Legend of Zelda has very deep RPG roots. There's no reason why we can't have a party system where you can pick to play as Link while Zelda follows you, or you can pick to play as Zelda while Link follows you, each of them with their own unique combat system. That's just where this needs to go if they want to break conventions in a way that is like modernizing the series. And, you know, let me know in the comments if you disagree with that, but I feel like that would be a huge improvement to the Zelda games. And then the last one I have is art style. Now I put this here not because it was necessarily a criticism of those 2 games. Actually, I think it was one of their highest praises was the art style. But I put this here just because a lot of people are saying they want a new art style in the future game. And so I just want to give my quick comment here that I want the consistency, like I love the consistency of the art style between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Obviously, it's more than just a consistent art style. It is literally the same characters. But what I mean is, like, because those 2 are the same art style, the same characters, they not only tell me that those games are connected, but when I play both of them, they actually feel connected. Comparing that to something like Wind Waker to Twilight Princess, those games, I'm told, are connected through this large Zelda timeline, but honestly, when I play the 2 of them, they don't feel connected. And so that's what I mean here. Keeping this new game in the same art style, not to say that it can't have improved graphics and better lighting and all that stuff, but the core of the graphics need to be the same to where they feel like they're in the same universe. Because right now, a lot of the Zelda games don't. You've got like that whole branch of games that are like in the art style of Toon Link, and then you've got games that are in the hyper-realistic art style of Twilight Princess, and it just like, they don't feel connected even though we're told that they are. And I'm not doubting that they're connected, but I'm saying they don't feel connected. So all in all, none of those criticisms require us to like completely rework this series, completely change up everything. All of this can be fixed within that same framework of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Like, we don't really need another interpretation of this series. What we need is not a reset of the series, but a progression of the series. So I want to talk about why progression is more important than a reset right now. And obviously that answer is because the continuity and the lore are important to Zelda fans. I mean, just look at how we fight over the timeline. Like, we want our things to be connected. And, people ask like, well, the Zelda team's more focused on gameplay more than story, right? So like gameplay versus story, there's that big discussion. And honestly, when you ask me, I answer with this. I like playing Zelda games for their gameplay. That's what keeps me playing. But I love Zelda as a series because of its story, because of its lore. Like, that's what makes me go from liking a game to loving the game, is the fact that the story and lore, they get me immersed in this world, right? Gameplay alone is great for keeping me playing, but it doesn't keep me invested in the series as a whole. You get so many die-hard Zelda fans because of this continuity, how it connects, the plot twists within the games, like, Ocarina of Time, that whole thing with Sheik and Zelda when I was younger, the 7-year time difference from picking up the Master Sword, like that kind of stuff was crazy for me.
Everything I've done up until now, it was all for nothing. So I really am just a failure. All my friends, the entire kingdom, my father most of all. I tried and I failed them all. I left them all to die.
And I want to, give a little bit of a comment saying that, like, continuity doesn't always equal good story. So when you use like the Marvel universe as an example, like all of the movies in the MCU are connected, right? They're in the same universe, but that doesn't always mean that every single MCU movie is good. So I just want to, as much as I'm saying that this continuity is a good thing, it doesn't always equal a good story. But then a counterpoint to that counterpoint is, even though all of these Marvel movies don't always have great stories, I will say that the ones that I am most invested in are usually the Marvel movies that are playing a pivotal role in the main overarching plot, right? So like all the movies that tell me something about the Infinity Saga, I'm usually more invested in those than I am movies that are just telling me about, the ground level heroes. But this isn't a Marvel video, this is a Zelda video, and I'm gonna say, Zelda fans have proven that they love their lore and continuity as well because of the timeline. We are always wanting to see how things fit in the timeline. We're wanting to see how these games are connected to each other. So honestly, that proves it right there how important this is. And speaking of the timeline, I want to say actually the two timelines, because, if you've seen some of my videos, you know how I feel about this. But basically, we have this whole overarching timeline with all of the Zelda games before Breath of the Wild. But then, honestly, just between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom alone, we've gotten an expansive timeline between just those two games. And I'd say that, like, Switch era timeline almost even rivals the timeline we have with all the other games. And there's debate on where all of these games fall within the timeline. If you want to know my answer, honestly, I think they are separated. That's why I made that statement about there being two timelines, because I really do feel like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are kind of like a separate but parallel timeline. And honestly, there's a lot of things that lead me to this conclusion. You can go watch my earlier videos predicting Age of Imprisonment. Now, none of those predictions came true with Age of Imprisonment, but nothing in Age of Imprisonment told me that that what I'm talking about isn't true. So you can go see more info there on why I feel like there's two separate timelines. But the biggest evidence, honestly, is simply that the Zelda team themselves have not addressed where the games go. They made Echoes of Wisdom after Breath of the Wild, and they've told us where Echoes of Wisdom is on this great Zelda timeline. But yet Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are both just kind of separately pushed to the side. I don't think that's an accident. I really do think they're kind of just making a separate timeline. But all that aside, honestly, really doesn't matter whether they're connected to whether Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are connected to the rest of the timeline or not. It honestly doesn't matter. The statement I want to emphasize here is that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, of their own volition, have an amazing timeline that I'm going to read out here. Okay, and so I did just write this. I know there's probably more detailed stuff in like the Masterworks book, for example, but for now I just kind of made this off of my own memory as kind of a casual fan. Well, I say casual, but then I also said that I played almost 1,000 hours of these games. So, take that what you will. This is what I remember as a timeline, okay? So with just these 2 games, there's 4 games if you want to count both of the Hyrule Warriors titles, Age of Calamity and Age of Imprisonment. We have, at the beginning of the timeline, we have a time of gods and goddesses that predates the creation of the world. Then you have a time after that where they entrust the ancient Zonai. And this is a time where the ancient Zonai are more prosperous. It's not shown to us, but it is discussed kind of in a way throughout the games, namely Age of Imprisonment discusses it. But not really. It's more this next period of time, which is the downfall of those ancient Zonai. Those details, they're not shown to us, but the way of this downfall is kind of explained through Age of Imprisonment. So if you haven't played Age of Imprisonment, they kind of explain how the ancient Zonai, they don't even explain it, they just kind of suggest it. But in game world, that kind of is explaining it. Okay, so now we're at basically the events of Age of Imprisonment. After that, we have the founding of Hyrule. Well, that's the Age of Imprisonment. So the founding of Hyrule with the original Ganondorf conflict and his sealing, which we saw in Tears of the Kingdom. Okay, then there is an undisclosed amount of time which is filled with a reincarnation cycle of Calamity Ganons. Then we have the Ancient Calamity, which is 10,000 years prior to the events of Breath of the Wild. So this Ancient Calamity has the ancient hero who looks something like a Zonai, but honestly he doesn't, because he looks more like a wolf than he does a goat. So there really is still no explanation for why the ancient hero looked like that. Then later down the line, 10,000 years later, we have the last reincarnation of the Calamity Ganon, which the champions could not defeat. Then we have 100 years later, we play the events where Link finally does defeat that prior mentioned Calamity, and that Calamity is described as Ganondorf giving up on the reincarnation cycle. So we know that that's why finally then we get to the real Ganondorf, which is from Tears of the Kingdom. So we play the events of Tears of the Kingdom where Link is able to now defeat the true source of the Calamity, which is the true Demon King, Ganondorf. Okay? So Ganondorf caused all those reincarnations, and that's kind of how we end this timeline. So that is like a full series of events that we get from these 4 games. And that is a fitting end to this timeline. We finally defeat this version of Ganondorf. But honestly, that's only a fitting end if Ganondorf is the true villain. Wink, wink. I don't think he really is. I think there's somewhere more we can go from there. And so I lay that whole timeline of events out just to show the impact that you get from having a series of games that are connected to each other. Like, we really have a full world here of events, and honestly, all of the gaps are not even filled. There is so much more you can do while staying within this framework, within this art style, within this version of Hyrule, so to speak. And I want to do that. I want to stay here. And I also point out this timeline to honestly show that it can definitely compete with the timeline we've had in the past. That honestly, like, this timeline to me is way more compelling. I'm more curious about events in this timeline. What are some of the reincarnated calamities that happened during those 10,000 years between the Ancient Calamity and Breath of the Wild? Or what about between the founding of Hyrule and the Ancient Calamity? Like, there's so much you can put in there. And then we still don't really know anything about the Ancient Zonai, the connections between the Zonai and the dragons, why the springs, or the protectors of the springs were clearly suggested to be Ancient Zonai, but we don't really get to see that. We don't really see how the goddess gave trust into the Zonai at the creation of the world. So, like, there's so much more you could explore here. But okay, I'm not going to just open this can of worms and not, give you something to feast on. So this is where I have the most fun, is actually, creating these ideas for what could come. I will say I originally came up with 2 sequels, so 2 future games, Breath of the Wild 3, Breath of the Wild 4, if you will. But after really thinking about it, this first concept I'm going to say I really don't think is very plausible. I think it would be hard for the Zelda team to make this, so I definitely don't think they'd want it to be the next game that comes out. So I'll go through it quickly, but it's really the second game that I'm going to pitch that is the real, like, wow, I would love to see the series move in this direction. Okay, so we're going to be keeping the of the titling, so like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. Just to keep that consistency, I decided to call this game Ancients of the Past, which I admit is extremely lame. So go ahead and comment down below after you listen to this pitch and tell me what would be a better name for this game. This game would essentially fill in 2 time periods on the timeline that I just laid out earlier. So we would play as the ancient hero, yes, the one from 10,000 years before Breath of the Wild, and play with him as we see him in Tears of the Kingdom, which means our Link, so to speak, won't look human or Hylian. He will look like a weird green wolf thing, okay? And I think that will play an important role in the story. But we would play out his somewhat generic story of the ancient calamity. And I say generic because we already know that, the Sheikah were there. We know that he teamed up with Zelda and we defeated a calamity. So the ancient hero would be a species long thought extinct, the Zonai, although like I said, he looks more like a wolf than a goat. So that would need some explanation that we would get in this game. Parallel to the story of the ancient calamity, which we mostly know, our hero would also be connected either spiritually or physically to the ancient Zonai, like a world of the ancient Zonai. And he would be learning about his heritage there. So essentially, you would be playing in 2 worlds. You would be playing in the Hyrule that we know, although from 10,000 years in the past, so hopefully there would be some significant difference. Although seeing as we saw Age of Imprisonment, it doesn't seem like much has changed from Age of Imprisonment to Breath of the Wild. So the world, they kind of would be locked into a kind of a world that is very much like what we've already experienced. So the big difference would be us going to explore ancient Hyrule during this time of the ancient Zonai before Hyrule was even founded. And that's where we would get to see a world that looks drastically different. So there, our hero would learn about his heritage, why he looks the way he does, what is it about the Zonai that is important, some story thread that the team would come up with. We would explore the time before Hyrule's creation, and key story events would be that we see the ancient Zonai characters, which eventually underwent draconification to become the 3 dragons that we know as the servants of the spring. So essentially, we would get to meet those 3 dragons when they were Zonai characters, and they would be playing a pivotal part of the story, helping kind of teach or, having some sort of plot with these characters, teaching our hero and helping prepare him for his battle in his time. So there would essentially be 2 conflicts here. There would be the ancient calamity, which, the Zelda team can't really offer much that's new to us with that conflict because we already know how it's going to play out. But so then the secondary conflict, which would actually be the conclusion of the game, would be this conflict in the ancient Zonai time, where because of what the hero is doing in that time, he kind of helps solve this conflict in ancient times as well. So yeah, that's that. And then another gameplay hook that this game would have is that the ancient hero, looking kind of like a wolf, would actually be able to move around in wolf form. So yes, this would kind of be a callback to Twilight Princess in a way, and maybe this game could also bother other aspects of Twilight Princess, like maybe instead of going to the ancient past to find these Zonai, maybe those ancient Zonai actually went to another dimension, like the Twilight Zone.
You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
Or the whatever it was called, the Twilight Place from Twilight Princess. And so maybe that's actually where this ancient hero is going. He's kind of transferring to another realm rather than another time period. So that's kind of my idea for that game. So there's definitely some intriguing things there, but the more I went over that concept with myself as I was reading it in preparation for this video, the more that I was like, you know what, I really don't think they would do this because they like to make their games distinct. Like, I think the reason they don't have a lot of Sheikah tech in Tears of the Kingdom is because they want those 2 games to be distinct, and I think they succeed at making Breath of the Wild feel very Sheikah oriented and Tears of the Kingdom feeling very Zonai oriented. Like, they have their distinct look. And I don't think they could do that with this game because we know there's going to be Sheikah tech because we've been told that the Sheikah Guardians were created to help destroy this original version of the Calamity. And then we also we know that there's going to be Zonite tech as well because the ancient hero is dressed in Zonite garb. So it's like we've already seen Sheikah tech, we've already seen Zonite tech. They would have to put them both in here again, and that would really give this game a difficult time standing out from the games we've already played. And I think with this next Zelda game, especially with the responsive Tears of the Kingdom, they need something that's going to feel different and not just feel like another rehash. And even though they could make this game mechanically feel different with some of the things I mentioned earlier in this video, they could do that, but I think visually it wouldn't stand out enough because they'd be so locked into a world that they've already kind of shown us. Not to mention that even though it'd be cool to play as the ancient hero, we already kind of can play as the ancient hero if you just wear the ancient hero's aspect in Tears of the Kingdom and play like that. So then the next game that I had, this one is a game that will actually be able to push the conventions of the Zelda series while also kind of paying tribute to some of the older parts of the series and also give us a progression of the Zelda story rather than a rehash or reimagining of the same battle between Zelda, Link, and Ganondorf. So here we go. I present to you The Legend of Zelda: Heroes of the Future. Another terrible title. Again, comment below what I should name this game. So, Heroes of the Future will take place after the events of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, so this is a true sort of sequel. With the Calamity Ganon defeated in Breath of the Wild, there is no more reincarnation. With the true Demon King, Ganondorf, then defeated in Tears of the Kingdom, there cannot really be another Ganondorf that's evil. But a new male of the Gerudo will inevitably rise now that this version of Ganondorf has died. This game will follow our character, Zelda, but this Zelda will be the grandchild of Zelda from Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. In other words, the Zelda that we've seen, we will see her in a super old form where she is essentially a grandmother. Or maybe you could just make her like a motherly figure instead of a grandmother. But either way, this is like at least one, if not two generations past. And then the other character we'll follow is a character named Link, which is going to be a knight who is named after the king Link, which is the Link that we know. And this will essentially canonize the fact that Zelda and Link eventually became married and ruled over Hyrule together as king and queen. So that will be a cool connective tissue to the older games, but it's so far in the future that it won't make you feel like you need to play both of those games before jumping into this one. You'll be able to jump into this one as a newcomer to the series. It also gives us our classic Link and Zelda, but actually explains why they're Link and Zelda instead of just we always play as Link and the princess is always Zelda. So it kind of gives us a little bit of an explanation as to why, even though we all know it's because it's The Legend of Zelda. So in this game, the new Gerudo King, the new male that will inevitably be born, he will not be under this reincarnation curse like we have had up to this point. So he actually will not be evil in this game. That plot point could be revealed as a mid-game plot twist, like maybe the game starts with, maybe it's even promoted with the players thinking that this is going to be another classic battle between a Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf, but then kind of midway through the game, we kind of get the reveal that like, oh, actually this Ganondorf is not a bad guy, he was just, maybe misguided, he was just doing something else, he isn't evil for the sake of being evil, he actually does want to work with them, or he is being manipulated by something. So we actually will get him as a hero in this version of the game. Like in this game, he'll be a hero instead of a villain. And then instead of a Ganondorf being the true villain, our actual villain of this game will be Null. Yes, like the one from Echoes of Wisdom, we'll get essentially our iteration of that character. So Null will eventually be revealed as the true villain behind all of the evil, even the evil that kind of created Ganondorf, the Demon King, from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Null will essentially be revealed to be responsible for all of the evil in this world. He'll kind of be like an ancient evil that predates creation. So Zelda, Link, and Ganondorf as a team, like as an RPG party where you can switch between the three of those characters and fight, combat, everything, you can switch between them interchangeably. That would be amazing. So all three of these characters, and by the way, maybe Ganondorf isn't named Ganondorf, maybe he's just named something else, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. Some sort of Gerudo character that is on your team. So, and honestly, if you're going full RPG party, it would be awesome to have some sort of Rito, some sort of Korok. I doubt we'll go that far. Honestly, I doubt we'll even have Ganondorf. I can see us maybe having Link and Zelda as playable characters, but more than that, I really doubt it. But, if we're doing dream scenario here, it would be awesome to be able to play as multiple species. Anyway, so the three of them will learn about the long-lost history of the Triforce, because we haven't seen the Triforce yet in this continuity of Zelda games, this kind of quadrilogy of games. So they'll learn about the history of this Triforce by traveling either spiritually or physically or interdimensionally. They'll travel to the time when these gods existed. Or perhaps we will get revealed to us that the gods were never actually gods, they were actually Zonai. I know the Masterworks book says that the gods created the world and then they entrusted it to the Zonai, but maybe that's just, inaccurate legend. Maybe we'll get revealed to us that there never actually were gods, they were always just Zonai. Even Rauru didn't seem to know much about the ancient people of his own species. So it could be possible that there never were gods, they were always just Zonai, and maybe this game would show that to us. So we'd see like a Zonai character who was supposed to be Hylia, a Zonai character who was supposed to be Dinra. It would be really cool to see that. And then of course it would be awesome to see, like I mentioned in the prior game that I pitched, it would be awesome to see those Zonai go through Draconification and maybe see why they needed to go through Draconification to solve some ancient conflict. Maybe that ancient conflict being some version of Null. That would be very cool. And then together, this trio, learning about the origins of the goddess Hylia, they'd learn about her opposite, Null, as his ancient existence. And then they would bring about, I mentioned they would learn about the Triforce, right? In the past, they learn about the creation of the Triforce. In current time, so they would travel kind of between the distant past and the future. Not their future, but the future of what we know, right? Their current time. In that current time, they would bring the Triforce together and they would grant their wish to have life flourish in Hyrule rather than being swallowed by the nothingness of Null. So honestly, I love that pitch. Do I think it's a little far-fetched? Yeah, I do. I have a hard time thinking that the Zelda team would do anything where Ganondorf isn't the main villain, especially with this movie coming out. They kind of need to solidify this trio of characters, and I think it would be really difficult to do that. But I mean, if this game comes out in 2 years or so, I think it would be, people would want something different, and I think moving away from Ganondorf is what they've wanted to do since Breath of the Wild. Honestly, if you ask me, I think in Breath of the Wild they wanted to end this. I think that's why they mentioned this reincarnation cycle coming to a close. I think they wanted to move past Ganondorf. But then I think they had all these ideas to make a DLC for Breath of the Wild. That DLC became way too much, and they created Tears of the Kingdom. And so in creating Tears of the Kingdom, they needed to find a way to keep it connected to the world, which means they came up with the idea that Demon King was actually this version of Ganondorf, rather than I think what we all expected was that the Demon King they talked about in Breath of the Wild was referring to the Demon King from Skyward Sword. So I think they kind of shoehorned in this lore from Tears of the Kingdom, and I think that's why Tears of the Kingdom feels a little like it's missing something. But I say all that because I think they really have been wanting to move away from Ganondorf as the villain. Echoes of Wisdom also is a demonstration of them wanting to do this. So I think it makes sense that this actually maybe is a little more plausible than I would think. But I love this idea because it's so far in the future that it kind of gives the team freedom to do what they need to do to make the world different, but also keeps them connected to the world that we know. I think it lets them do some really cool game-changing mechanics, like giving us multiple characters to play as, kind of like a big RPG party, different combat styles within those characters. You can still have more advanced combat with Link. You could have some spell combat with Zelda. You can have some brawler combat with Ganondorf, or give him a weapon too. Either way, you can do some more unique stuff here. The fact that the game does take place in the future means that the setting can be in the same Hyrule we know, but there's enough time that passes that the setting can be more developed. Like Hyrule Castletown can actually be a castle town that is actually populated with people and looks developed. Maybe sorry, not Sheikah Town, oh my gosh, Sheikah Town. Kakariko Village, because the Sheikah Tech will be able to advance again. Maybe we see Kakariko Village as like an advanced, like city with like skyscrapers and stuff like that. Maybe not looking like what we see like in Atlanta or New York, but maybe looking like Sheikah technology, but in the way that looks kind of like skyscrapers, like an advanced city rather than a little Japanese village town. And then also there's plenty of time for new villages to have developed and just make the world more populated, basically make a less barren Hyrule. Because of this whole thing exploring the ancient past as well, we could get another map. When we go to that ancient setting, that other map could then be even more for us to explore that feels different from what we've got in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So overall, this premise essentially gives the Zelda team a way to like make a game that's connected to what we know, but it gives them enough freedom to make their own game. It's able to honor the past by finally showing us the Triforce in this version of Hyrule and the Zelda series. Like it gives us the Triforce back. We've been missing it, but then also is able to connect us to the future and the past. We get the traditional elements of the Triforce that we've been missing, maybe even the creation of the Master Sword, again, depending on if you want to count Skyward Sword as canonical in this version. So we can get some of those traditional aspects, but then also give us new game-changing things that push the conventions of the series. So what do you think about my pitch? I really want to hear what you have to say. Go ahead and leave a comment. If you enjoyed this video, give a like. Consider subscribing. I don't always do Zelda content, although Zelda is probably my favorite series. Generally, with this channel, I want to be making videos on what I'm playing. So right now, I have some Pikmin videos I want to make because I am playing through Pikmin 4. I also picked up Animal Crossing with that new update, and so I'll be making some videos, some tours and stuff. Other than that, this year, I'm planning on playing Metroid Prime 4 later. I want to play Pragmata when that comes out. Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is something I'm looking forward to. I'm trying to get through the Xenoblade series. So there's a lot of fun games that I am looking forward to, and I want to make videos of games I'm playing. I don't really want to follow news and trends. To an extent, making this video is kind of following the trend of the Nintendo Direct and 40th anniversary and stuff. But within my means, I want to make videos on stuff I'm interested in. It's not going to be a specific series, but if you like my ideas, if you like listening to me talk, then go ahead and subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it. But with that, I'll go ahead and close the video. Thank you all for watching Vincenzo Gaming. See ya.